Very happy that you could make it, and welcome to the Get Started Smile seminar. Okay, before we start, I would like to make a few housekeeping points. So first of all, the session is going to take 1 hour, so we try to finish on time, 3 p.m. Manila time or Singapore time. There will be somebody in the chat as well as in the Q&A discussion that you see below. So please don't be shy, ask your questions throughout the session. And we will also have a dedicated Q&A at the end of our session. And you have the choice to ask these questions in public, but you can also ask them in private. This is a private seminar, so you don't see other participants here. Okay, so let's just jump right in. A quick introduction of the team and the hosts of today's seminar. I'm Jerome Eger, I'm the CEO of Smile API. With me today is Jean Pabellion, who is our CPO, as well as Vince Villamil, who is our head of sales. I'm going to make a quick introduction about Smile, what we do and where we see an opportunity in our partnership. Jean is going to give a quick overview of what we do in terms of the product and how we implement it. And Vince has got some really cool goodies following up. So in one word, Smile is the easiest way to connect your employment account with your favorite financial service solution from an end user's point of view. Smile makes it very easy through a single API to get access to your end user's information. And while we build this bridge between employers and fintech, we always have the end user in mind, and they have full control about the information that is shared. Next slide, please. So essentially, to take a look at the problems that we're solving. So first of all, we have a lot of friction in the existing process. Then the cost of basically receiving that data is associated with a lot of friction, and it is very cumbersome in many situations to actually get employment information when you look at the paper process that you usually have to go through to verify employment. Then there's always a risk of trustworthiness with this data. It is easy to be tampered with for a lender to really be sure that there are no black sheep amongst their customers. And after all, there's a very poor experience for your users that is associated with the friction that I just mentioned. And it often leads to, basically reduced onboarding capabilities of your platform. Next slide, please. So essentially, Smile, the solution to really simplify it, we have 3 points. First one is essentially what Smile provides is the data, as I mentioned, from the employer, from the employment platforms that are essentially connected through an API to you as our client. We offer identity information as well as income information in longer data lines. You will get a time series as well as real-time data through our API. The API is in many cases a read, but also in other cases also a write API. It helps you to directly integrate the information into your system to have a streamlined KYC or risk management process that really helps you to scale your operations and make the user experience really excellent. We also have a portal that enables you to really get quick insights into that information. As I mentioned, identity as well as employment history, And all of that information is readily available in that portal, and it really helps you to get a fantastic overview about what your customers are doing. Now, next slide, please. What we have specifically as a differentiator, if you look at the traditional way of verification, Smile automates the process in a very seamless way, and essentially the end user has a wonderful frictionless experience. The data integration tools that Smile offers, not just a turnkey solution, but it is essentially something that helps you to aggregate the data, normalizes it over all of the different employment platforms. So data is the same, and makes it therefore easier for your risk management or for your data guys to work with our data. And specifically when we're talking about the service providers that we connect to, it's very interesting in the next few slides that I will show you. We are serving or we're basically onboarding a lot of the freelancer and gig economy platforms that have a lot of underbanked individuals there as the beginning. So Smile is a partner that would like to grow together with you. We'll also at the end of the session have an overview as to what we will be offering in terms of traditional employment, as well as a lot of other additional and alternative employment. But for now, this is a very interesting data set that we offer you that is basically offers a lot of a blue sea opportunity. Okay, talking about opportunity, next slide, please. We are specifically looking at the freelance and the gig economy opportunity. Now here really quickly, the Philippines is the #1 fastest growing market in the world for the gig economy in 2020, with over 200% in growth and earnings, only followed by India. These are really amazing numbers. We can also discuss with you in more detail where these numbers come from and provide you with sources. What we see on the right, essentially here are conservative numbers. So the Philippine gig economy provides income for almost 2 million workers. Please bear in mind that these are 2019 and 2020 numbers because they haven't been updated to 2021 yet. So if we combine the growth numbers really conservatively, we have around 3 million or even approaching 10% of the population that are more and more of the working population that are working in the gig economy out of the 40 million employees in the Philippines. Now look at the distribution here. We have roughly 80% that are working in the freelance economy, very quickly growing segment, followed by riders. These are delivery guys, taxi drivers, parcel delivery services. That has suffered a little bit during COVID, but still growing. And then a new segment, which is basically e-commerce, a lot of retailers that have found a new source of income, very reliable from home work as well, which is a segment that Smile is covering too. Now, next slide, please. Here we have got 4 points that we find particularly interesting and worth mentioning. First of all, the gig and freelance economy is already covered to 90% by Smile, specifically in the Philippines, but also we have growing numbers in other markets that we seek to cover, namely Indonesia as well as India. The gig economy is largely untapped when we're talking about coverage for financial services or financial institutions in general. So it's a wonderful segment to serve. First of all, people in the gig economy have had very good experiences with financial services in the past. So they're very excited segment to first become part of this segment and to be served. And as I said, really 5% of the Filipino workforce is working and earning in the gig economy. Again, this is a very conservative numbers. We expect this to even be higher as of now, but we don't obviously have real-time data. Now, it is obvious that COVID has accelerated the whole process, and but it has been an ongoing transition that is driven through digitization and generally more gig-oriented work. Now, with that, I would like to close the overview about the gig opportunity and the freelance market and move on to the next segment. So we have a very quick poll that I think Jean is going to help us to pop up now. Again, what you see is individual. Nobody sees how you vote apart from yourself. This is, okay, we say here 5 minutes, but I usually expect this to be much, much faster. So you can choose between 1 to 5, 5 being the highest and 1 the lowest. How familiar are you with APIs personally? This is important as a real-time poll for us. So Jean, during the seminar, knows maybe overall what are the points that we should focus on. Yeah, you can just vote, and we will have a quick outcome basically for Jean. Now, this was the last part from my segment. Now I will give over to Jean, and thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we see you in the chat. Cheers.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerome. So thank you for answering the poll. So that was very helpful for me, just to kind of give me more context about your experience with APIs, like how familiar you are with it. So I see some of you are familiar with it. Some of you are experts already on it. There's some that maybe would appreciate a little bit of like an overview of APIs. So if you already know this, so bear with me. So first off, let me start off by introducing what APIs are. So basically, APIs are a way for different applications to talk to each other. Think of it as a kind of like a standard language, so that different systems, although they may be performing different types of work, can exchange data with each other. So think of like, let's say a CRM system working with an e-commerce system. So they can exchange, for example, customer information or payment information or things of that nature. So, so the way this works, so imagine, let's say you built an app. So many of you, I think, have already built a web app or a mobile app. So imagine your user using your mobile app to get information, to make a request. So in an API, your client makes a request. Typically, it goes through the internet. So it travels through the internet. It hits a server. Typically, the server then routes it to a resource, such as a database, to retrieve that information, and then it sends it back. Now, many modern APIs, they use something called, they follow a style called RESTful architecture, or representational state transfer. So essentially what this means is they send a representation of an object or a piece of data, and send that via standard web protocols like HTTP, and send it in a standard format such as XML or something called JSON or JavaScript object notation. So this is a very, very simple and efficient way for different distributed applications, wherever they may be around the world. As long as they're connected to the internet, it's a simple way for them to send requests and receive a response back. So that's essentially what an API is. So what is the Smile API then? So the Smile API essentially works the same way. We use a REST architecture. We send data via JSON format. So this is like a widely accepted way of exchanging data. What makes Smile a little bit different is that instead of just connecting you to one system or one data resource, Smile is a gateway, if you will, to different types of data platforms, specifically employment and income platforms. whether they be gig platforms, as Jerome mentioned, like Freelancer, Grab, or Upwork. Could be commerce platforms, like people selling online in popular marketplaces. And in the future, enterprise systems like your HR systems or payroll systems. So something that we're working on very actively at the moment. So Smile basically allows you to have just one connection. So as a developer, I can just connect to one resource, one API, Smile, and be able to get all of these data from, regardless of the source or the platform. Smile takes care of all the aggregation and also normalization of the data. So normalization means we send the data to you in a standard way. So typically that's one of the integration, one of the challenges associated with data integration. The data comes back to you, in all sorts of different formats. So you have to do a lot of cleaning and stuff like that. But with Smile, we take care of all of that for you. So one of the ways we do that is we standardize it, we normalize it. So when we send the data to you, for example, we use commonly accepted standards. So for example, when we send the date and time, we send it in ISO format, globally accepted formats. Or when we send, for example, the country codes and currencies, it'll always be this 2-letter code for countries or this 3-letter code for currency. If we send the phone number, it will follow something called the E164 standard, which is the international phone number format, where you have the country code and area code first, and then the phone number next. So all of this is to make the jobs of the lives of your developers very, very easy. So for you to be able to really appreciate the API further, we actually provide an interactive documentation in our website. So if you go to getsmileapi.com, you can actually go to the link developers, and then there is a link there for docs.getsmileapi, which is our online documentation. So I can actually show that to you very quickly. Let me just pop over to my browser. Let me close this. So this was our coffee music a while back. So, okay, so this is our documentation portal. So again, the URL is docs.getsmileapi, right? So, and then here, you can actually go down to this area called APIs. You can actually inspect, and you can have your developers look at the different resources available and look at the structure of the data, or what we call the schema. So they can actually inspect it, see what type of data type it is, and they can see sample output, for example, and they can get they can get sample code. So if they're working using if they're using JavaScript, jQuery, or if they're using C#, or if they're using I don't know, Java. So all of this is here. So we provide sample code. If they want to have be able to interact with the data, they can simply enter their credentials. So I'll talk more about that in the next slide. So okay, so what'll be probably interesting is show you an example implementation of let's say a theoretical bank, a neobank. Let's call it Filipinas Bank, that has implemented the API, right? So some of you may have seen a previous demo that maybe I have shown, or maybe Jerome has shown, where we've shown you a chatbot and you will get the identity data. But for this particular webinar, we thought it would be more interesting to present an example that is probably more close to how you would actually use our API, which is really by putting it into a mobile app. So if you have a mobile app, if you're into, let's say, banking or lending, you probably have a customer-facing mobile app. So to do that, I've set up a quick example. So this is a tool that is just visually shows you how to build an app very quickly. So without using code. So it's just a way for us to kind of see how this works in a visual way. But before I do that, let me just give you a quick example. And to set this up, in this scenario, we will pretend that we are a user whose name is George Palomero. So George was a security guard before the pandemic, but when the pandemic hit, he had difficulty making ends meet, so he decided to apply to be a Grab driver. Now, unfortunately, if you're a driver, if you're a gig worker, typically it's very hard for you to get access to financial services. But in the case of this example, Filipinas Bank has decided to partner with Smile to be able to give people like George easy access to financial services. So let's see how that works. Okay, so let me go back to my browser. Let's do a preview. So hopefully it's coming through. Okay, so here, okay, so this is the login of Filipinas Bank. Let's say I am George. If it's my first time using this app, I'm going to sign up. So for now, I'm just going to use our sandbox environment. It'll ask for my email. So I've pre-typed it here. So my full name, let's just say sandbox user. Okay, so I sign up. So what happens behind the scenes is, like in your app, right? It will probably sync to a database or probably sync with your CRM or whatever you have set up behind the scenes. But what you can actually do is if you integrate with Smile, you can actually make an API call and then be able to retrieve the information to be able to go through a linking process. So to illustrate that, so let's say I'm George, I'm interested in applying for a loan. I'll apply for a bridge loan. It says here there's 2 financial products available. If you're a gig worker, Filipinas Bank can approve my loan application instantly with very low interest rates because there's very little cost to kind of verify the data. But if I were like an employee and I had to go through the traditional process, I would have to submit my company ID, employment certificate, upload my payslip. It'll probably take 5 or more business days. And so typically for financial services companies, this is where they see a lot of fall off, or as Jerome mentioned, a lot of friction in the process. Okay, so since this is Filipinas Bank, again, they're using the Smile API. I'm a gig worker. I select that. Now, Filipinas Bank calls the Smile API, retrieves the list of employment platforms Smile has in its network of providers. Let's say I select that I'm a Grab driver. It calls something that Smile calls the Wink widget. So the Wink widget is that mechanism by which we can link the employment data to Smile. So it asks first for the consent of the user, and then we click on Get Started, and then asks for my user information. So I'm a Grab driver, so I have to select Philippines +63. Okay, so I have to. So for purposes of this demo, we're using a sandbox account. So this is very important. So the sandbox account is actually available in our documentation. If you go to docs.getsmile API, you go to getting user data, you will see a link here on the right called testing in sandbox. You will see here a sample login information for George Palomero. So I'm going to get his number. I'm going to go back to the screen, enter that number. Okay, and then it sends that I'm able to log in. Grab, like in most employment platforms, they probably have a verification mechanism. It will send a verification code or one-time PIN to my phone number. I enter that, and then that's it. And then the data should have been linked, right? So behind the scenes, Smile does the heavy lifting, talks to the system of Grab, pulls the necessary information that might be useful for you guys to vet George's identity and see his capability to repay the loan. So then it says, thank you, your account data has been linked. So let me so my Zoom account is vacant. So let me just maximize this, make sure I'm not, so Zoom is not clicking on my screen. Okay, so the account should have been linked. So there's a behind the scenes, again, Smile gets the needed information to get George's profile. So his full name, his contact information like email or phone number, depending on what he has shared with the platform, becomes available to you. So not only his identity information, but also his transactions, right? So transactions is essentially like his financial information in the platform. It's like your bank statement. You see the cash coming in and the cash going out. To maybe that might be useful for your credit scoring or things like that. If the information is not enough, you can always ask him to key in more information, so you can use the same data to pre-populate your sign-up form, again, for the purposes of reducing the friction in the sign-up process, so you don't lose people in the onboarding for your particular applications. So that's essentially how it works. So it's instant, and then there, you can provide a very good user experience. So very little friction, happens in minutes, not days. So awesome. All right, so let me go back to my slides. Okay. Well, let me shrink this back. All right. So let's see how this was built. So let's just spend a few minutes to explain how this was built, deconstruct a little bit the demo, and then I'll switch in between the API and also the front end experience, so you can get the sense of how it was built. Okay, so but before we do that, again, very important, you should have a developer account. So I think most of the people who attended this call should have been provided a API, something called an API key and API secret. If not, no problem. Just email us at access@getsmileapi.com and we'll get you sorted right away. Okay, so once you have the API key and secret, this will give you access to our sandbox. Just something to keep in mind though, that you should keep this secret, right? So that's the reason why we call it API key and API secret. So once you have this, so people who have this have potentially access to sensitive, personally identifiable information. So make sure that it is safe and secure at all times. So do not share it with anyone else. Each person, if you have multiple people in your organization, we can give each of them separate API keys and API secret, so that there is a separation of visibility, or there's a more secure way of handling the data. So I'll go more into that later. So okay, so once you have that API key and secret, something to keep in mind as well, that it is unique for each mode in the Smile environment. So what does that mean? So there's two modes in the Smile environment. There's something called the sandbox. This is like a play area. You can experiment with the API. You will get sample data, like the data that I showed you earlier from George. So these are all example data to help your developers get started. And then once you're ready to go into production, then you will have to go back to us and ask for the production API keys and API secret again, right? So this, again, we will have a separate set of credentials to go into production. When you go into production, that's the time now you can retrieve data, live data from your customers in the employment platforms that they use. Okay, so very important to remember. Okay, so again, to go back to the process, right? To deconstruct the demo we did earlier. So essentially, there is a user, right? We have the user of your app. So going back to our demo, if I go back here and I close this. So essentially, in the sign up process, right? Typically, right, in your sign up process in your own app, so you have probably a login screen. That's the time that you ask your users to enter their username, password, their full name, or whatever information. What you can do is you can actually use this time to initiate the user creation process as well in Smile. So Smile also relies on a user. Let's call it a user object, right? The user object is that person, represents that person who is who's going to share his information, his employment information with Smile, and in the end with the financial institution, right? So in that process, creating that user is very important, because when you create a user in Smile, we actually at the same time provide something called a token. So think of a token as like a key, right? So the token allows you to initiate the linking process, and it is unique for every user to make sure it is secure. So this unique key allows him to go through the linking process and connect the specific accounts that he needs to be able to share his data. So in this visual example, in the sign up process, there is a mechanism by which you can call a user in the Smile API, and then when you call the user, something called the user endpoint, and I'll show this how this works. When you call the user endpoint, it creates a user, and at the same time creates a token for that user. So if I run this example just very quickly, so it creates something called an access token. So if I were to illustrate this in a different way, so I'm going to use something called Postman. Postman is something a lot of, it's like kind of like the de facto tool people use to test an API. So if you were actually go to the user's endpoint and you go to the create user endpoint, you can actually initiate that process. Okay. So we need to pass a parameter. So you can initiate a process to be able to create that token. So that parameter, so going back here, right? If I go back here, that okay, so that parameter is to be able to of course pass on the well, things like the authorization. Of course, you need the proper authorization, and then you need to make a request and get the token, right? So once you have that token, that allows the user to be able to initiate the linking process, right? So to initiate the linking process, you will probably, so there's two options. You can either have the Smile present to the user a list of the data providers available, or you can do that yourself. You can present the user your own front end to allow the user to select their employment platform. And so to do that, you can have, for example, a list in your application that will show the different providers. So how does that work? So if you go to here and I make a request to this endpoint, right? So the Smile sandbox.smile API.io/v1/providers endpoint. This is the list of the providers that will be returned by that endpoint. And that once you have that, something called that a collection of these records or a collection of objects, that collection now you can present in your own front end. So in this particular example, this is a collection of providers. I'm saying here that for the title, show the provider name. For the subtitle, maybe go to the provider subtype label, which is kind of like, which is this one, this particular field, which is the subtype label. Show that. And basically allow the user also to filter the data. So they can also send a particular query parameter. So the query parameter can be, for example, the subtype. So how does that work? So if I preview this app again, if I go back, and I go through that linking process. So I have here a filter, right? So for example, I only want to see the transport and delivery services. So what happens behind the scenes, when I call that provider's endpoint, I pass a query parameter for type or for subtype. So it will look something like this. So subtype equals, let's say, transportation, right? So which we will see here, right? So here it will only return now the transport and delivery related employment platform. So you can actually have your users filter that data simply by passing additional parameters to our endpoint. Okay, so that's how it works. Now, once the user selects that a provider, right? So there's the linking process. So to initiate the linking process, and here I'll go back to my slides to kind of better illustrate this, right? So to initiate the linking process, what happens is once you create the user and once he has that token, you use that token to initiate the link flow. And this is all explained in our documentation, but I just want to give you a conceptual overview. So that the user now has a token, you use that token to be able to open the link flow or the wink, to open the wink widget. And the wink widget basically it is a widget that comes from Smile. It's basically a JavaScript SDK which you can embed into your web app, or you can embed into your native mobile app. You can use a web view object or something to kind of embed that this SDK. And this SDK now presents the user with the authentication and login screen so that they can now begin the linking process. And when that linking process happens, what happens behind the scene is something called an account object is created. So for every user, you can have an account, right? And you can have many accounts. You can have one account, you can have two accounts, you can have 5 accounts. So George Palomero, going back to our example, can have a Grab account, can have a Food Panda account, you can have a Borzo account, or any type of accounts if it has multiple accounts. And for each of that account, we are able to retrieve account-related data. And that account-related data essentially is the information he shared in that platform. So his identity information, his name, his email, his phone number, his address, date of birth, gender, things like that. And also the transactions he has within that platform. So, the income coming in, fees, withdrawals, so things like that. So again, if he has multiple accounts, each of that account has account-related data attached to it. So you might be wondering, when you query the endpoint, when you start testing, how come there's multiple identities? The reason for that is if you don't filter the data, if you don't pass the appropriate query parameter to limit the data to a particular account, and if you get all the data from all accounts, you might see that this person has multiple identities. And that's because he has multiple profiles that he has set up from Freelancer, from Grab, from Online Jobs PH, from Upwork, and so on. So any of this data is available, and then your developers now can pass the appropriate filters or query parameters to get the particular data you need. So it's all explained here. So if I go back to my browser, I go back to our example API testing tool. So if so for example, if I query the list of identities, so if I query this, basically it will return all the linked data. Sorry. Oh, okay. I have to remove the sample parameters. Okay, it will return all the data that has been linked so far, right? So by your users. So a lot of that. So there might be several of them. You can limit them, for example. So you can limit the size of the returned objects to maybe just 3, for example. So it will just return the last 3 most recent identity records linked by your users. You can filter by a particular account ID. So account ID, so this, in other words, all of the information that was linked to a particular account. So let's say account ID equals this one. It'll only return that particular identity data associated with this particular Grab account, right? So this account is from a Grab user, and this is the account ID associated with that account. So a lot of interesting things you can do. A lot of that is explained in more detail in our API documentation. The conventions are explained here. If you go here to API reference, So a lot of the conventions and the query parameters are explained here. If you scroll down here, so how to go through the pages of results, the different query parameters you can pass. But if you want to go into specifics for each endpoint, you can go down here, go to a particular resource such as identities. You can use the interactive documentation tool, just enter your credentials, create a sample request. You can use, you can pass the sample parameters. So let's say I wanna just return one result. So it'll just return one result. So if I want 3, so I can return 3, so you don't have to type anything. So now there's 3 identity records returned. So all of that you can do without downloading any other tool in our interactive documentation portal. Okay, so let's let me go back to the slides. Okay, so again, just to kind of give you an overview of the resources. So when you look at the documentation, you will see probably these 4 things. So the first is providers. So if you wanted to find out what are the list of employment platforms we currently support, just look at the providers endpoint, hit that endpoint, you will get the list. If you want to initiate the creation of a user to again initiate the linking process, you will see the user's endpoint. The user's endpoint, it has a way for you to create a user on this in Smile and then get a token. Now that token, just something very important to keep in mind, that token to ensure security, it has a short life. It expires after an hour. So if you want to refresh the token for a user, you will see that there's a token endpoint, and that token endpoint allows you to refresh that token for the user if it has expired already. So let's say you have a user who can link his Grab account today. 5 days from now, he wants to go through the linking process again. For it to work, you have to build into your the linking process a refresh of the token. So this is something very commonly used, right? When you have these SDKs. So you have to refresh the token so he can reconnect his another account again, maybe 3 days, 5 days, a month from now, or a year from now. So you simply have to refresh the token associated with an existing user. So that's the token endpoint. And then finally, you have the accounts. So again, if you have a user, he connected multiple accounts, he has a Grab account, Food Panda account, Borzo account. So all of these are accounts. Each unique account associated with specific user has a unique account ID. If you wanted to query that, get a list of all the accounts so far connected by your users, see the status, if it's connected, if it failed connecting, you can use the accounts endpoint, just the last one here on screen to get that information. And then once you have successfully connected an account, then you have right now 2 resources that are, that you have available. So you have the identities endpoint, which will allow you to get the profiles they have in these employment platforms, and then you have the transactions as a proxy for for determining their ability to repay or their proof of income or things like that. Okay, so obviously I can't go into too much detail, but what I do want to share is if you want your developers to get started right away, we have in the documentation a section for developer resources. So to kind of show you where it is, I'll go back to Chrome. There is a section here, hopefully you can see it, for developer resources. Ask your developers to click on that. There are several resources that we make available. So there is, okay, so there's several. Let me go back to my slides. Okay, so, okay, all right. So there's several. Okay, let me just. Sometimes I need to reshare my slides because it blacks out. Right. Okay. Okay, there you go. All right, so hopefully you can see that now. So it will be in the documentation. There will be a section there for developer resources. Just click on that, and then you will see that we provide 3 things, really three important things for your developers. First are the open API specifications. So the specifications allows your developers to understand and kind of go in more detail through the API specification that we use. So we use something called Open API 3.0 specifications. It's in YAML format. So it's a widely recognized format. So if your developers are very used to using APIs, so this is something that they can readily use. Another thing we provide is something called a Postman collection. So Postman collection allows them to kind of download the endpoints predefined and import that into Postman. So to show you how that works, let me go to my browser, go to the Smile API GitHub repository. So it's linked from our documentation. But if you want to go straight to it, you can go to github.com/SmileAPI. You will see their Smile Open API public repository. Here is the YAML file, which contains the Open API 3.0 specification. Here's the Postman collection. You can ask your developers to open that, inspect that. They can look at the, save that to their computer. They can go to Postman. They can import that data. And once they import that data, they will have something like this one, like a collection of the different endpoints available, ready to go from Smile. So they don't have to set it up. They don't have to spend several minutes going through the docs. Everything will just be set up for them. All they need to do is to get started is just essentially enter their API key and API secret. All right. And then lastly, we also provide something called a hopefully you're seeing my screen, a terminal. Okay, let me just make sure. Okay, there you go. So as I mentioned, we have something also, something called the Quick Start collection, right? So a Quick Start collection essentially allows you to allows you to basically see the download sample code from us. So if you go to our GitHub repository, you can see here down here a quick start sample code in GitHub. Just open that, and your developers can download this and then essentially run a quick start code. So quick start code basically allows them to run the link process locally in their machine, right? So just to kind of illustrate this very quickly, if they go to quick start, let's say they download it already, they go to let's say they can go through the documentation. It will ask them to go to the Node folder. It'll ask them to download something called Node.js. So if they're a web developer, they probably have that in their machine already. They have to install something called Yarn to run it, and then they can say okay, so they can run Node and then start index.js. That will start a local server in their machine. So that local server will allow your developers to try the link process in their own machine, so kind of get familiar with it. And they can go through the linking process here. And then they can enter the sandbox credentials and see the output and figure it out very easily. Okay, so so we're at the home stretch. So just very quickly, again, going back to our PowerPoint, we also have a resource in our website. Just go to getsmileapi.com/developers, then go to updates. It will redirect them to this URL, roadmap.getsmileapi.com/changelog. If you want your developers updated with the latest releases from Smile, they can go and subscribe for updates in that page to get these updates automatically in their email inbox. And then just lastly, before I end, we do Q&A, what's on our roadmap? So essentially, what we're still at the beginning of our journey. There's a lot of things we want to add to the product, namely more employment platforms, as I mentioned earlier. So things like HR, employment, payroll platforms. But more than that, we also plan to add more types of data that that might be interesting for you. So besides identities and transactions, you might want to look at their previous job history, a summarized view of their income, their performance rating, especially if the data is coming from gig platforms, education history, their assets, like they own a motorcycle or delivery van. These types of data might be useful for your credit scoring algorithms. It might be that in future we will be able to connect with the traditional credit scoring providers and provide that as well. So all of these are in our roadmap, and hopefully we can get them to you very soon. All right, so let me pass. So that's it. Let me pass it on to Vince to kind of discuss our offer.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan, my brother from another mother. Hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Vince. I'm with the sales and customer success team. And today I'm honored to share with you our promo, Smile Fast Access. So all you have to do is just sign up from now until initially it was Friday, but earlier before the webinar, we decided, okay, let's stretch it up until Sunday. So now until Sunday, November 21st, 2021, 11:59 p.m. Manila time. If you sign up, what you will get is a 4-hour white glove implementation service with our CPO, Jan, as well as our CTO, Bond. And then you have to bring in your developer and or your engineering manager, your product lead in charge of production or product direction, and maybe a compliance or an ops person, but basically primarily the developer. So our CPO and CTO will guide you step by step as to how you will be implemented. They might also even try to put in some testing service hours, in case you guys need to test after the implementation. They might throw in some hours in that regard, as well as some consulting, teach you some tips and tricks of the trade. And just a note, our record implementation time is 3 hours. So I think if you beat that, there may be something more in store for you. Who knows, really. But basically, it's a 4-hour white glove implementation service with Jan and Bond. Now, once you are implemented, you will get free access from the time that you are implemented up to December 31st, 2021. So that's full 6 weeks, or alternatively, until you consume 3,000 free API call credits, whichever comes first. Okay. So yeah, that's the Smile Fast Access promo. To get started, it's very, very easy. Just send an email to access@getsmileapi.com with the promo code 1118 in the subject line or wherever. We just need to see it. Once you do that, we will receive it and you'll receive a response and you will know how to move forward. Okay. So yeah, the trick is the soonest you send that email, the soonest you get the access, the soonest you get implemented, and the soonest you will experience the value of Smile API. So send in your entries. We'll be waiting for those and go from there. All right, back to you, Jerome.
Awesome, Vince. Thanks. Thank you so much. Okay, so last segment is our Q&A session. I think that has a little bit been moving from the Q&A button to the chat button. So I see there's lively discussions on the chat side with Bond, Johan, Vince, and myself. So I see lots of questions and discussions. Also here, just a quick intro if you don't know them yet. So here's Johan, who is also in the chat now. So just text us if you have any questions. Johan is our Chief Strategy Officer. A lot of you probably already know him from initial discussions. There's also Bond, who is our CTO. Bond is everything technical. If you have any questions regarding implementation, how to connect, and also testing, Bond and his team is readily available to talk to you. And as Vince just mentioned, so we do this, how we call it, white glove, or I call it chauffeur service. If you want to get started with Smile, Bond, as well as Vince and Jan and myself, where I can help, we throw in all the time. So your developers just have to lay back. We do the implementation basically. So all of the hard work in terms of implementation can be done by us. So you just lay back on a Zoom call, and we basically tell you what to do. So I think Vince just mentioned that we did one implementation that was under 3 hours. I think it was 1 session or 2 sessions or so, and then we were done. Also, when it comes to the implementation in terms of ideas on your side, what's the best way how to implement Smile into your registration process? We've got some really cool and creative ideas that we are happy to share with you. Generally, if you have any additional questions, I see in terms of time we only have 1 minute left. I'm sure you probably have a few more meetings to catch. Happy that we made it in time. I see a lot of questions already answered in the chat. So we'll be in touch. Johan, Vince, and I will be happy to answer all your questions. Otherwise, we just call it a day. It's been great. Thank you so much. Also here, there's some additional information, how to get in touch with us, I guess. I don't know all the names here in the chat, but I guess you probably already have our contact details. If not, just feel free to take a screenshot here. And otherwise, super happy to be to be in touch with you guys. So I see. Oh, we have an. Is it an open question here? All right. Vince will. I think that this is an open one. If you want to take this. Otherwise, I think we have more information. Okay, I'm just gonna take this as an open question here. So one question is, how far back does the transaction logs go? So to answer this question openly, it basically depends on the employee and how long he's been working for that platform. So very simple. Let's give an example for, let's say, Upwork. If you've been working on Upwork for 3 years, then it goes back to 3 years. I think we have a maximum of 10 years that we are covering. But essentially, what we usually see is anything between a few months up to a few years, if that answers the question. And as transaction income data as well as spending data. Yeah. Okay. So at least we got one Q&A question that was open. Thank you so much. I respect your time, so we're gonna call it a day for this one. We have more seminars coming up, either on a monthly or on a bi-monthly basis. So yeah, very happy to see you all again. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.